Hello and welcome to the 10th episode of the Green Bean podcast. My name's Katie, this is Jack, and you are visiting us in my studio in Devon, which is in the southwest of England. And I am so happy that you've decided to join us, whether this is your first time visiting or whether you've been watching along since the beginning. I can't quite believe I've managed to record 10 episodes. It's been a really enjoyable process, so thank you for joining us, and I hope you enjoy catching up with what we've been up to. I've got a surprisingly festive episode to share with you today. If you're watching this soon after it's published, it's December. Things are a little Christmassy here in the UK, and I always think of myself as not a particularly Christmassy person. It's not that I hate the holiday as such, but I'm not religious, and it's very much a commercial, capitalist horribleness around us. It's all about buying stuff, and it's just not my cup of tea. I love the kind of festive traditions and family and all the special food, but actually this year myself and my partner and Jack are just going to be staying at home, having a quiet few days off. And that's why I say surprisingly festive, because I don't really go in for a lot of fuss. But I don't know, maybe it's because I've been taking part in this online community a little bit more this year. I've been enjoying watching lots of people sharing their Vlogmas videos in the lead up to Christmas, and I've just been finding myself wanting to make festive things. So I've had a secret gift knitting project going on since September, which I can finally share with you in this episode, and a surprise festive knitting project that I started as well. I've been working on a few festive commissions for my clients, and somehow that's ended up with me wanting to draw penguins and holly and all that kind of stuff in my personal work as well. So I hope you enjoy what I've got to share, whether you're watching this in December or not, and we'll take you on a nice walk on Dartmoor as well. The project I'm working on today is a surprise gift for my sister. So if you are my sister and you happen to have watched this far, please switch it off now, unless it is after Christmas, and then you'll know what the gift is. If you're not my sister, you're very welcome to keep watching. If you don't know already, I have been for the last couple of months working on some Christmas stockings for my sister and her family. It started because my sister actually got in touch with me about some stockings that she'd seen on Pinterest and asked if I could make them for her. And me being a glutton for punishment and deadline knitting, I said yes. And the pattern was a pattern called Spindle Knitter's Christmas Stockings. And I guess it's not really a pattern. It's a lady who designed her own stockings and then made all of the charts available on Ravelry. And they are gorgeous stockings. But I'm not the kind of knitter to do what I'm told. And I also thought, if I'm going to all that work for my sister and her family, I really want them to have something unique rather than to follow a pattern. So I decided to take inspiration from those Christmas stockings, but actually design my own. So I bought a selection of shades of Jameson's of Shetland Spindrift, which is probably my favourite yarn for stranded colour work. And I picked a palette of muted Christmassy and nature colours, reds, greens, browns, golds. And I've worked up a design based on that. I did a swatch just to get my basic gauge for the colour work and to figure out how big I wanted the stockings to be. And then I've been making it up as I've gone along, to be quite honest with you. So at this stage, which is Saturday the 8th of December, I have 2 stockings completed, which I can show you. This was the first one that I knitted, and this is the one that's going to be for my nephew. It will be his second Christmas, so I don't suppose he'll be too excited about having a stocking, but hopefully it will last him for many, many years to come. So the stockings are knitted from the cuff down. I start with the ribbing and then work down. There are some short rows included for the heel, and then a toe. I like to do a barn toe, which is like the decreases at the top of a hat. You just keep decreasing until you have enough, few enough stitches to pull your thread through and draw it up to a close and not have to do any Kitchener stitch, which I do not enjoy. So this is the first one. There's a white space up here where I'm going to embroider Thomas's name. But apart from that, it's finished. It's blocked. You'll notice I haven't woven in my ends, and just to turn it inside out for you, I also have not woven any ends in on the inside, and I do not intend to. I thought about it and then I thought I can do better than that. So my plan is to just knot them together and cut them off with maybe an inch or so to spare. And then I'm going to line the stocking in some stockinette fabric, just to give it a bit more sturdiness. And the plan is to fold this large cuff inside. So that's what the finished stocking will look like from the outside. And this cuff on the inside will be folded over and stitched down to cover the raw edge of the stockinette fabric inside. So it's going to have a nice neat finish and a lining, so nobody's going to be bothered by those ends, and I'm not going to be bothered by having to weave the ends in. Perfect. The second stocking that I've finished is the one for my sister. I just cast this off yesterday, so it hasn't been blocked yet. You'll notice the ribbing's still really stretchy, and the colour work is still a little bit stiffer and more wibbly compared to this kind of soft drapey version of the one that's been blocked. So you'll notice I've decided to not use any of the same charts on the 2 stockings because I want them all to be unique and variations of the colour palette, but no 2 stockings are going to be exactly the same. So I've really enjoyed picking charts from Pinterest and adapting them, playing with the colours, and as I said, I've just been making it up as I've gone along. So I've done one section and then thought, oh, that's quite a lot of green, maybe I need a bit more yellow in the next section, working in yellow, and then thinking, well, that's quite pale, I need some more contrast, so adding a darker background in this section, and so on. Just basing the balance of colours on what's come before, and I'm really pleased with how they've turned out. At first it felt like a kind of insurmountable project, you know, when you take on something so big, and I don't enjoy knitting for a deadline. I wasn't feeling very enthusiastic about it, but now that I'm in the flow of things, I'm actually really enjoying just the freedom of making up a pattern as I go along. The recipe for the sock is fairly basic, so I'm just free to play. It's sort of like drawing. Every year about this time I seem to become completely obsessed with penguins, and I think that dates back to when I was maybe about 11 or 12, and it's really my first memory of getting completely excited and obsessed about a creative project. And it happened in the lead up to Christmas. I just had some plasticine modelling clay and I started making penguins, and it became this massive thing. I think I had like a shoebox and I filled it with, there must have been about 30 penguin characters that I made, and there was a family putting up their Christmas tree, having Christmas dinner, ice skating, all kinds of things. And yeah, it's just a really vivid memory for me of getting so obsessed. And you know, when you're so deeply in that creative process that you don't know what time of day it is, you don't know how long you've been spending on it, nothing else matters, but you're focused on that thing that you're doing. And you know, those little moments like that are really important, because I think they were things that started to teach me that being creative was what I wanted to do with my life. But also I think it is, you know, it's just such a memory, and it's why I always end up being drawn to drawing and making penguins at this time of year. So I'm going to make a little penguin for our Christmas tree. I'm using Sculpey modelling clay, which I believe is an American product. Most often in this country you can buy Fimo, which is a German product, and I just don't like it as much. I've spent a lot of years working with both. So model making has always been a part of my creative practice since I was a child, and when I went to art college I did quite a lot of 3D model animation, so I you know, it's not so much part of my work anymore, but I definitely have lots of experience with model making and different kinds of model making materials. Definitely Sculpey is my favourite clay to work with. It has a it's fairly soft out the packet. You don't have to spend ages squishing it and working with it being really crumbly, but Fimo or Fimo, I don't know how you pronounce it, they have a product called Fimo Soft, which is soft straight out the packet, but it's so sticky and it gets all over your hands. I really don't like it as much, so Sculpey is definitely my preferred modelling clay, and I haven't bought any for years because I have a ridiculous amount of it in my drawer stashed away, but I seem to remember when I did last buy some that I bought it from a seller on eBay. So there's my penguin's body to begin with. This here, by the way, is just a ceramic bathroom tile that I use because I can take it straight from my modelling table and pop it in the oven when he's ready to be baked. I'm going to move from black to white clay, so I'm going to clean my hands in between with a baby wipe to get rid of all the black off my hands. So next I'm going to give my penguin a white bib. And then I'm just going to use red for his feet and his beak, and obviously his Christmas hat. He's going to need a Christmas hat. So I'm ready to add some red bits to my penguin, and I've gone for a pretty bright red. I don't normally go for such bright colours, but I thought this guy needs to be lots of fun, so I'm going to do his feet first. This one's really colouring my fingers. Just give him some toes. I don't know how many toes penguins have, or if they even have toes, but this guy's got 3 toes. Another foot to match. This tool I'm using it's like a paintbrush, but the tip is made of silicone, so it's really kind of squishy. It's basically like having an extra finger, but one that's really small. If you can hear rustling in the background, it's Jack who's just decided to climb into my rubbish bag. So I've had a last minute change of heart, and I'm going to give my penguin a lurid green bobble hat and a matching scarf. And what I'm going to do, instead of adding the detail at this stage, once I've got his basic hat and scarf on, I'm going to bake him. It takes about 20 minutes in a cool oven, just about 120 degrees centigrade, and then once he's dry and cool, I will paint on the fine details, so a pattern on his scarf and his eyes. It's much easier to do that with a pen or a paintbrush afterwards. There is one more thing I do need to do before he goes in the oven though, and that's to make a hole somewhere, probably through his head unfortunately, to make sure that I can tie a string on him to hang him on the Christmas tree. So this is going to be the brim of his hat. I'm just going to press it flat and then I'll add some indentations in it to give the effect of ribbing. So the last thing I'm going to do is give this guy a little pom-pom, and rather than just sticking it on top where it might fall off, I'm going to actually make a hole first with the silicone finger, poke a hole in the top so it gives a little well for some of the pom-pom to stick into and help it secure more firmly. And then finally I need to make him a hook, and I've got a little piece of black wire here. Just gonna make a loop around my tool, twist it, I'm going to be very naughty and cut it with ordinary scissors. Probably should cut it with wire cutters, but I have ordinary scissors here. And it's better if the stem of this little hook is a bit wiggly and uneven, because again that will help it latch into the head and not just slide straight out. So I'm going to wiggle this in just behind the pom-pom. There we go, he's ready to go in the oven. Now you might wonder why I'm sitting at this weird low angle, but actually it's a really helpful way to sit when I'm going to do some tiny detailed work. If I was standing, then I would be bending over the table. So it's nice to have a table at this height where I can draw and work on this guy without bending over on my back too much. So I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do yet. I've got some white ink and a black paint pen, and I think I'm going to use the pen to do the eyes, so we'll start with those. The reason I'm unsure about using the ink is because I actually haven't bought any paintbrushes for ages, and all the ones I could find are a little bit, the tips are a bit ruined, so I don't know if I can get the detail as fine as I'd like it, but I'm going to give it a try. And if I hate it, well, it's only a Christmas decoration. So let's see what happens. As I said, I've been completely obsessed with penguins lately, and I think part of that has been because it's been involved in my client work as well. Although that was kind of my choice. So I had a commission to do a Christmas party invitation, but it was very open. The brief was really that they just didn't want any religious imagery in there, and they didn't want any images of Father Christmas. And apart from that, I had fairly free rein. So I thought, what better to draw than a penguin's Christmas party? So I used scratchboard for that illustration. I've done a few penguin scratchboard pictures before, so I used a kind of a character design that I already had and developed it for a few different penguin characters, and I had a lot of fun. I can show you the finished illustration without the details of the party, which has already happened, even if you did want to go and gate crash. But this is the image without the date and the details on it, to give you an idea of how the illustration came out. So I used scratchboard, I scanned it into Photoshop, and then I added the touches of red and green to kind of bring it to life a little bit more, I guess, to add a little bit of colour. And as I'm sitting here painting this little penguin, I realise he's very much one of the same group of penguins. He looks like he's going to the same party, so hopefully he's going to be very happy hanging on my Christmas tree. So since finishing the Christmas stocking project yesterday, or I should say nearly finishing it, I didn't quite complete what I hoped to. I finished the three human stockings for my sister and her partner and for my nephew. I didn't quite get to finish the cat's one on time, and I figured that of all of them he would be the least concerned about missing out, so I will finish that for him in time for next year, but at least I got the three people's stockings in the post in time. And I don't know about you, but I find when I've been in a sort of creative frenzy, if you like, really pushing through to get something done for a deadline, I find it quite hard to wind down afterwards. I'm not the kind of person to just collapse in a heap and sit there, much as I'd like to be, and that might feel like what I would like to do, but actually I get kind of jittery and I want to be doing something else. It takes me more time, a longer time period to wind down, and so one of the ways I dealt with that after getting the stockings in the post yesterday was casting on something new to keep my hands busy. So a nice relaxing project, but without any pressure. And what happens when you knit without any pressure is suddenly things happen really quickly. So this is a jumper, obviously not for me. You might be able to tell by the shape of it and the position of this strange little hole at the back that it is for my little furry friend. And I cast this on yesterday, so it's had just a couple of days work on it, although it's been a couple of days where I haven't really been doing much more than knitting and watching TV. So I haven't knitted this in an hour at the end of my working day. I have been working on it fairly constantly since yesterday. And I guess there's a few things I want to mention. The first is that I'm not really the kind of person who wants to dress my dog in clothes. There's not that there's anything wrong with it, it's just not something that I want to do for fun, I guess. Obviously Jack wears a coat when he goes outside, it's cold, and it helps to keep him dry. I guess I'm in favour of dog clothes for practical reasons and not so much for dressing up and looking cute. However, Jack really loves wool. And I mean that in a couple of ways. He really loves stealing yarn. It's one of his naughty things to do, is to jump up and steal yarn that might be lying around on my desk, or stick his head in my knitting bag and steal a skein. And he has an uncanny ability to pick out the most expensive skein from a bunch. He's a very clever boy. But something else that he loves about wool is lying on it, or even wearing it. Particularly he's fond of wearing my shawls, and if he's ever anxious I can wrap him in one of my shawls and it seems to really soothe him and calm him down. So I thought actually he might quite like a jumper of his own for the comfort aspect and also for the warmth. We do obviously we do a lot of walking out on Dartmoor and it does get cold. He gets cold, especially when he's got wet feet. So I thought it might be nice to have a go at making him a jumper. And if you are going to make him a jumper, there's no harm in making it ridiculously cute. So that's what I've gone for. You might recognise the pattern. It is Rachel Brockman's Lunaberry jumper, which I was talking about in the previous episode because I drew the schematic for her pattern. And obviously Rachel's pattern is written for small humans, not small dogs, so I'm making quite a lot of adaptations to the pattern. I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail because I've been making notes as I go on my Ravelry page, so if you want to go and have a look exactly how I've made it work, I've put detailed notes on there about what I changed in Rachel's pattern. Obviously the position of the arms is the most important thing, so instead of being at the side of the body, the arms are at the front here, so they're going to point downwards, and this hole in the back for attaching his lead to his harness, which will fit underneath. The other thing I'm going to do is going to work some short rows to extend the back here, so the belly will stop quite soon, but there'll be a longer curved back to keep his back warm, and just some tiny sleeves. I'm not going to go down to his ankles with the sleeves. I'm just gonna have a cuff basically on here to finish it off. The yarn I'm using is some scraps that I had of West Country tweed from Blackie Yarns. It's a nice local yarn to me. Most of the fibre comes from Devon or Somerset, and it's got these kind of colourful neps in the tweedy yarn, so it's kind of fun. It's a woolen spun, really bouncy, warm yarn, and I've noticed that Jack prefers woolen spun over worsted spun when he's choosing a shawl to lie on, so I thought that it would be a good choice for his jumper. It's also quite hard wearing. It's got some Black Welsh mountain fibre in it, which gives it a kind of grey base colour. I think it's a good choice for his jumper. So the West Country tweed is the green and the red, and the white is just a bit of Shetland DK. Again, just some scraps that I had lying around. I think altogether I'm probably going to have used a maximum of 200 grams of yarn for this project, so 4 50-gram balls, maybe a little more. Jack has been trying it on as I go, so I'm very impressed actually. I'm very encouraged that he doesn't hate me putting it on, and I think he's going to be quite happy wearing it when it's finished. He's been a very patient model. I've never knitted a dog sweater before, let alone adapted one from a human pattern, so I'm quite pleased with how well it's fitting. He's been very patient with trying it on 3 or 4 times today while I've been attending to his measurements. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the Green Bean podcast. I hope you've enjoyed sharing a bit of what we're up to. As I've mentioned throughout the episode, I feel like I've been in a bit of a creative frenzy the last few weeks, not just on gift knitting for a deadline and frantic personal projects, but also I've been really busy with client work as well, and none of that is a complaint. It's fantastic to have work to do, but I'm feeling a little bit like I'm on the edge of knowing that I've been working a little bit too hard. I'm a little bit exhausted, and I know that I need to work at winding down. Jack's had enough. He's going to go. See you later, buddy. So I'm really glad that we've got the next few days as a holiday, and I'm going to have a chance to decompress a little bit. It sounds great, but actually it's one of the things I find the most difficult, so I'm going to be really challenging myself to take a step back and try not to work for a few days. We'll see how successful I am at that. All it remains for me to say is that if you celebrate Christmas in whatever way, I hope you have a lovely one. And if this is a difficult time of year for you, you're not the only one. There are people who understand and people who've experienced it being a difficult time of year as well. So I encourage you to, if you can, realise that you're not alone with that. If you want to catch up with me between now and the next episode, then you can find me on Instagram and Ravelry as Katie Greenbean, and I will look forward to catching up with you in the new year. Take care and thank you so much for watching. Bye.